Hello, I am Alex Pearson, joined by Dr. Keith WEINGARDT.
All right.
I am your host of the Pet Health Unlocked podcast, and we are super excited to have Keith in-house. It is always a pleasure and a
Good
treat.
To be here.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when you're here. It's just better than Zoom. You know, I always like looking people in the eye and having a table and it's just good stuff.
Yep.
And we always have such good conversations. I was mentioning to Keith before we started recording this one, sometimes we should have a little B-roll because the stuff that we talk about in between is pretty awesome.
It could be fun.
You know, I just love learning and talking with Dr. Keith. He is one of the most knowledgeable people I've had the pleasure of working with over the last decade. I've been in animal health and supplements in general. For those that don't know, maybe this is your first time watching, Dr. WEINGARDT is not only a practice veterinarian, but he has been our chief formulator, 4 years now?
Six.
5 years now?
Five or six.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That makes me feel old.
Flies.
It does make, I mean, geez Louise. Your daughter was what, 10 when we met? That's wild, man. And feels like yesterday to me. You know, in that time, we have come out with a lot of products. And what we wanted to touch on today, I guess we'll call this podcast Powders versus Chews, or Chews versus Powder, whichever way you want to do it.
Or choose and powders.
Choose and.
Doesn't have to be a competition.
Exactly. It's not a competition. And why we have both. You know, a lot of the times I don't think people out there understand how much goes into formulating. And once the formulation's done, how much goes into getting it to market, right? You know, I think that people, you know, a lot of the times I wish I could just take people through the entire process. You know, it could be a 2-year process. It could be a 6-month process. We've got a phenomenal product that Dr. Keith has been working on called Digestive Enzyme that we will probably have in the next month or two. I don't know if you even knew that. It's finally getting out there.
Good.
But how does, coming from Keith's brain to it being bottled, there are a lot of in-between steps from there.
That's right. Cost,
sourcing, ingredients. And to Dr. Keith's credit, he is a bit of a stingy when it comes to ingredients,
stingy.
Right? Like, you know what I mean?
Particular.
Yes, you're particular. But, you know, we don't want to put things in a product that we've put so much time and effort into if it's not going to work. And there's a lot of ingredients that won't work with another ingredient, so on and so forth. When I met Dr. Keith, him and his wife were customers of Thorn Vets, and my father and I took Thorn Vet over from Thorn Corporate in 2019 and ran it on and started running it on our own. And we decided to go from capsules, encapsulated products, to chews. And when we did that, I'd say within about 4 to 6 weeks, and we were kind of transitioning, right? We had chews and we still had encapsulated product. You know, it was both. And we got a call from Beth, Keith's better half, and she goes, "What are you doing with these chews? I love them, but there's some dogs that just aren't going to like these chews for whatever reason. They might smell bad to them. They might, you know, be a little harder than, you know, a geriatric dog could chew, whatever the case might be." And she goes, "You need to have a powder version of this." And thanks to you guys, we develop powder versions of every single product. But a lot of the times I think customers wonder, is there a difference? What is the difference? When should I use one or the other? So we're going to break that down real fast. First, the chews. Easy. Almost treat it like a treat sometimes, right? Like, you know, I can shake my dog, you know, the Peaceful Pet, longevity, probiotic, and he'll just come running. Just like, you know, it's a treat that you find. Exactly. It's like a, you know, you'll gobble it down and loves every minute of it. However, Marchie doesn't like the Peaceful Pet chews. I don't know. He'll eat the probiotic. He'll eat the canine basic nutrients, which typically has I wouldn't say a bad odor, but a strong or pungent odor than, say, a Peaceful Pet because of all the botanicals and whatever else. But for whatever reason, Marchie doesn't do it. And we just, put the powder on top. So when we get from Keith's formulation, from his brain onto paper, start sourcing ingredients, we make both a powder and a chew. Now with the chews, and Keith, if you could explain before we get into that, ingredient-wise, it doesn't matter. We can put whatever ingredients we want into a chew or powder, correct? It doesn't matter if...
Correct. I mean, you're still always... one of the big considerations in formulation is palatability.
Yes.
Right? So one of the things at Thornvale, we always make sure that the products are going to be safe, right? So safety is our first priority. We want to make sure that whatever we're going to put in there is not going to create toxicity and have minimal interaction with other potential medications or creating other challenges in the body.
Now, how do you do that? Do you just know that because you're Keith, doctor, or do you get, okay, so you got to get in there.
So you have to research every single ingredient that goes into a formulation has a database around it in terms of the research that's been done around that in particular ingredient. Also, bioavailability is a big kind of thing that we look at. We've talked about this before. Is like, okay, is that even if this ingredient has these great effects on the body and therapeutic effects, is it absorbed in enough quantity to actually do anything? Right. So that's always going to be a consideration too. So all these variables kind of like come into understanding. And I think each ingredient is going to be determined from a safety standpoint. Then we look at dosing. How much do we need to get into a chew or a scoop of powder for it to be effective? And in order for us to accomplish that dosing to achieve the therapeutic effect, we also have to make sure that that ingredient is bioavailable. So it's going to get into the body and have the absorption that we want it to be able to do what we want it to do. So that's going to be, those are all considerations that we have. And then we look at how we can combine ingredients, whether it's herbs or herbs combined with other nutrients that are going to have what we call a synergistic effect. How do they work together and build that formula's efficacy together? So the fundamental premise of synergy is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that if I take each individual ingredient by themselves are only going to have so much effect, but when I combine them, it's an additive or a beneficial effect that's because of the combination of those ingredients. So I think those are all variables that go into our into my thought process in making these things. But when we look at actual, like the chew matrix, for example, like that's something that's really important for us to evaluate too. And
yes,
working with our manufacturer, we try to create the cleanest ingredient profile within that. Now we have to use some food sources, which is one of the kind of the challenges that myself as veterinarian and many of my colleagues look at is like we try to minimize the outside or inactive ingredients. So when we're utilizing a formula, we want it to be really made out of what is going to be doing the actual work and minimizing what we call any inactive ingredients. Mm-hmm. So while the chew matrix has to have those, we try to find ones that are going to be not challenging for the body, not going to be stimulatory in terms of, say, if an animal has food sensitivities. We try not to put, like, for example, chicken protein or liver or any of that type of stuff into those matrix. There is like some sunflower lecithin, and there's some things that like Arabic gum that are in there to help as binding agents to kind of keep everything all together. But that's, again, we look at that the sourcing around those. So those are going to be the cleanest ingredients we possibly can. So
Keith is talking in regards to the chews. So when you make a chew, they have to be extruded. And when they're extruded, is if you can imagine, all the ingredients are in a, we'll just say a big vat, right? Where they're ingredients and then they're forced through an extrusion machine. And to get those chews to adhere, is that the best word? Maybe adhere to?
So it's to kind of all stick together.
Yeah, to stick together, because if you've ever had a chew, anybody, the hardest part is we hate it when they harden, like hard, right? And that's a thing in and of itself. But you can't have them be too soft either. There's got to be a good point in the middle. And so when Keith is referencing, and we've changed this matrix over the last few years as more information comes out, as we get better at tweaking that, we want to make it the cleanest chew possible. That way, when it to Keith's point, it's synergistic. You're able to get that chew and flip it to the dog, and they chew it down, and they're getting everything that they need. But it is a process. So for you, when you're meeting with a customer or a client, do you give your people the choice? Do you say, hey, which would you like? Or do you know the dog?
So it's really going to be contingent on, it's a great question. So I think that's tailored to the individual. So so if you have like a small little toy breed animal and they're kind of super picky and they really don't even necessarily like treats that much, the chew may not be the best option, right? For our cat patients, I almost never recommend the chews.
Powder.
Always go with the powder, which is why I'm so glad that we have so many of these powdered formulas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have like a robust Labrador who's he'll eat like whatever you put in front of him, the chews are a great option. And even if you have a dog who may be picky, you can always hide the chews. You can put them into something, or you can make them, cut them up really small and put them into some fresh food. They're a little bit of a harder sell to mix in with kibble. Obviously, that's where some people, they just throw it in the kibble and then the dog doesn't eat it. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean anything. You can still try and get that into them.
Yeah.
But I find if there's at all any pickiness around compliance, meaning that the pet actually taking the supplement, that's when I reach for the powder, because you can start with a really, really small dosage, like a sprinkle. And then you can gradually work up the quantity of that to get to the therapeutic dose, but you can do so in a way that allows for them to accommodate to that being in their food.
Yeah.
And if you start with a tiny little bit, they often don't notice, and very little bit at a time, you'll be able to kind of gauge how they respond to it. Our powders are very, very few inactives. We have to, and this was something I learned in the process of becoming a formulator, is that how are we going to make the least amount of inactives in our formula? And we've gone through some iterations of this and trying to minimize the amount of what we call a flow agent. So in order to put a variety of powdered ingredients together, they have to mix uniformly. Otherwise you'll have, a scoop may not have an even distribution of all those ingredients. So you may not have a balanced formulation going into every dose. So something has to be added to those powders to make everything mix uniformly. So many supplement manufacturers will use food-based ingredients, whether it's dried liver powder or chicken liver or sometimes sweet potato powder. And we really wanted to minimize the amount of reactivity around food ingredients. So we chose an organic flaxseed. And that's what we're currently using. And then there's a small amount of silicon dioxide, which has to be added as a anti-caking agent, because without it, all the powder just becomes like a big glob and a big brick on the bottom of the bottle, and that would obviously not be well received by our customer base. So we try to minimize the actives, and we've actually taken formulations that we've made and then refined them even further. So we use the least amount of the inactives to create a more concentrated formula. So you're not having to give as much of the formulation each time because the ingredients are more concentrated.
We just did that on, I'd say, 6 or 7 of those powders.
I think that's smart.
We tried to communicate it to, if you could actually touch on that, how we were to do that. So we had Longevity, which is one of Keith's most awesome formulas, was in a bottle. What did you say, about yay big? Mm-hmm. Yay big. And we got it down to about that.
So it's just modifying the amount of flax that was in there and just kind of really finding that sweet spot where everything mixed well, but we didn't have extra
powder.
Volume. Yeah.
And to do that, just so that you all know out there, isn't just some simple, easy thing to do. Do you know what I mean? It was thought.
Takes some figuring.
Yeah, and it really does benefit. Instead of having a scoop that holds this much, we were able to do that much. So we're always looking to do better, always following the science, seeing what can benefit our formulas more and more. So are there any breeds that you would say, well, I don't know if breed's a question. Like I said with March, he'll eat most of these chews, but there's certain ones he won't. And I really can't pinpoint why sometimes. Do you think it's usually smell to the dogs?
Or I think it's smell and taste.
Because because some Marchie got it in his mouth once and he was like, nope, not doing it. And I'm like, that's strange. So it's typically...
So I think it depends on the ingredients that are in there. So for some reason with the Peaceful Pet, I think that's sometimes the case. I think because it's very heavy on the herbals. Right, so there's quite a bit of herbs in there. So if an animal sensitive, but I can tell you, like having tasted every chew and every powder that we make personally,
So
I can tell you, it's really not that off tasting. But it is one of those that may have a reluctance to take it. So in which cases the powder is a great option, because for some reason it seems to be easier to hide.
Yeah, and I think dogs are like us. They like what they like.
Some are just picky. Yeah. And then we've done some work around the chew matrix to try and make it more palatable, but we are asking a lot for these animals to want to eat something that's a lot of ingredients that aren't necessarily the most palatable. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the challenge too.
Yeah, we it's interesting, as a business, when we came out with the powders, it was on the heels of the chews, and we now sell more powders than we do chews, or it's pretty dang close on most of those products. Is there with food, for example, raw food or kibble, is it okay to put powder on kibble?
Absolutely. Yeah. The question is, would the animal eat it?
Yeah.
Right. So I always think, what I recommend to my clients is to try and keep, unless they're really like, for Otis, he couldn't care less. I could mix anything in his food, he'll eat it. But if there's an animal who has any sort of reluctance to you putting something in their food, give them whatever supplements you're going to give them as a tasty hors d'oeuvre before you give them their food. So that way you're not tainting the diet. Like it would be unfortunate if, like, food is an important thing for our animals, right? And they look forward to those meals, and then all of a sudden they're looking at it as like, put that in there again. So this is why, take some, like, meat or something that you can easily, some cottage cheese, something that you can easily hide the herbs in. Fish is also a really good one. Sardines. Great way to hide herbs and supplements. So you can just give them a small amount of the sardines with the herbs in it, and that way you're not tainting the whole meal. And they don't have that correlation that you're trying to sneak something in there, So it depends on, like, there's very few animals we can't get to take things. So you just have to kind of tailor that to the individual.
Sure.
And like kind of try and find like there's those churu treats that are like kind of like pureed meat. A lot of cats love that. I can hide things in there. And what I always recommend is start slow. If you start with a sprinkle and work up, you can find what the amount is that you can get into your pet consistently without them balking at it. So even if you're getting some in, it may not be at that therapeutic level that we want. It's still better than nothing.
Sure.
So work up to what you're able to get from a palatability standpoint.
Do you have any advice to people? We get this quite often. Should I give them, let's say that it's a 50-pound dog, 50, 75 pounds, 2 scoops, 2 to 3 scoops, or 2 to 3 chews, depending on what you have. Do you like to say give 1 chew in the morning and 1 at night? Do you say do both in the morning? Do you have a preference on what your clients do?
I usually split the dose. So like if it's an animal falls on like three scoops or chews, then I'll probably do 1.5 morning, 1.5 at night.
Okay. Perfect.
There's no I don't think it really makes too big a difference. Once an animal is on a supplement consistently, there's some degree of steady state reached. So I think if you're doing as long as they're getting that quantity per day, they're going to get that therapeutic benefit of that milligram strength of those ingredients that you're putting in.
Sure. What about if they miss a day? Is it okay to double it the next day?
And I think it's also good to take breaks.
Absolutely. In fact, tell them your protocol. I love your protocol.
Yeah. So it depends. Like if I have patients who are taking, and you're saying like you don't have to double up the day after. Like So say you miss a day, just be a day you took a break, and then you just start that back up. The other thing around certain supplements, for example, like Peaceful Pet, I have some clients and patients who do better if they have a really stressful experience coming. They can double the dose.
Yeah.
So you can actually very safely double the dose of the Peaceful Pet and some of our other formulas where that can really enhance it. So I wouldn't go huge on it, but you have like some room to play with the dosage to find out benefit. So I find that's to be the case, certainly with a Peaceful Pet. I also find the gut health formula. You may find some animals do better with a little bit more when they're acutely having a problem.
Sure.
And then they can go back to a lower dose for maintenance.
Yeah.
So I think I forgot what your original question was.
I do too, because I just love your answer. Well, and you look, I think it was if you split it up or have it, or your protocol.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a good one.
So you start your protocols. Typically, if you're starting a new supplement, start from there.
Yeah. So when we first start, when say you're going to want to put your pet onto multiple supplements, I always recommend starting one at a time.
Exactly. Because why? If it works, you want to know. If it doesn't.
Or if it doesn't, if somebody has a problem with you want to know what's causing the problem. So I just start at a fraction of the dose, probably like a quarter of the dose. And I start with either a sprinkle of the powder or like a quarter of a chew. And I start there. And I work up to the full dose over 2 to 3 days. And then after I'm stable on that particular supplement, then I'll start the next one at a small dose and working up. Once an animal is already on supplements for a period of time, whatever you feel, and there's many of our formulas are very safe for longer term.
Sure.
But I think it's important to take some degree of breaks. Okay. So rotations, whether or not you go say, I'm going to do 3 weeks on, I take 1 week off. or I may do 5 days giving that supplement and I take the weekends off. So that way you're letting the body clean out and letting everything reset.
And why is that important?
I think it's just important from a detoxification standpoint, but also I think our mechanisms of our body and our physiology, we want to have times where they're not constantly being stimulated. It's allowing for everything to reset and flush out. And I think it's important just to have that as a rest period. I don't think the body always wants to be working. It's important to allow for there to be periods of rest so the body can have appropriate response to healing, repair, regeneration, and building up our own story.
And I love that. I love it. I tell everybody that since we've started working together. And, you look from a business standpoint sometimes, you'd think we'd want to be like, no, take it every day. So you can keep buying more. Do you know what I mean?
And
we're always looking out. We're always looking out.
Even with our own supplements, I think it's important for us to take breaks.
I started doing that with my supplements 4 years ago, and you told me that. It's always good
to give a little break, give a little washout. And then, even sometimes if I'm taking a lot of things, I may just take like even a whole month off.
So what advice would you give to a customer that's never tried supplements before? Would you say do both and see which they like more? Or would you go get the chew first, get the powder first?
Well, I think you're going to know your pet the best. So if you have a dog or an animal who's like really could care less and will eat anything, chews are probably the best, easiest, convenient way to go. If your dog's at all picky, or your animal's at all picky, you have a smaller animal or a cat, go with the powder.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be easier to find the compliance. Because you can have the best formula in the world, but if you can't get the pet to take it, it doesn't matter. So we want to be able to try and get these things into our pets in a way in which it's going to resonate.
Is there any tricks you could give cat owners?
I find like stinky things, foods that are like sardines, tuna juice. I'm not doing a plug for Churu, but I find those little pureed, like they're little tubes of pureed meat, and like they have chicken and tuna. The cats go crazy for that, and it's a really
What was it called?
Churu. Churu. Churu is the name of the company.
Cool.
Yeah, and they have a whole variety of different like little tubes that are full of the pureed meat. I like to give those baby food sometimes. I give that as like a little hors d'oeuvre. And if you start small and get them used to it, they can very much acquire a taste to it, and it becomes less of a palatability issue over time.
I really like the advice, and I never thought about this, and I don't know why I didn't, but is not putting it on the food, so to speak, so that they don't.
Well, you think about it, like if you every day you're like you look forward to your meal, and then all of a sudden somebody puts something on there that make it, you're like, I can't believe you messed up my food again, right? So and they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So I feel like giving them like that hors d'oeuvre option gets the supplement in or the herb or medication or whatever without it interfering with their pleasure around the food.
Dinner time, man.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be enjoying that.
I mean, we often spay and neuter our pets. We take away the sex drive. All they got left is food.
Yeah, seriously,
So
dude.
it's like,
oh my gosh.
So why mess with it? So I think it's like, so I think it's best to just make sure we're not tainting the food and affecting the palatability of the food and having it be given as a separate.
Yeah, that's awesome advice, man. So, we look at the powders and the chews, and could you speak on one more thing? We've actually came out with a couple, mushroom, digestive will be one, where we didn't make a chew, where we just stayed with the powder.
Yeah.
Why'd we do that?
I think for me, mushrooms are a food herb. They're easy to hide. It just felt like there was no need for an inactive at all.
Yeah.
Like keep it in its purest form.
Sure.
And we're using it as a therapeutic often for cancer patients or challenges of the immune system. So the cleanest, most direct way felt like the right thing in that particular case.
And see, the reason I asked Dr. Keith that is because we were always trying to do what's best for the animal. And you look at Mushroom Medley, which is another one of Keith's brainchild, and he's like, it's going to be best just to do in the powder on this version. And we typically always defer to Keith when it comes to that. But we're always trying our best. Yeah. That's literally what we're doing, and I think I've said it in podcasts before when, Keith he lives in the Pacific Northwest, and, he'll give me a ring coming out of the forest with multiple ideas.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
super fun to listen to because he'll come out and have a formula all ready to go. And as I stated previously, the idea in watching it come to fruition is quite fun because Dr. Keith will be like, oh, we should do this, this, and this. And then we found out that the middle part doesn't work too well because it costs too much, right?
Or bioavailability is a big thing too,
but we also want to keep it so that you guys can buy stuff, right?
Exactly.
We don't want to roll out a product that's $150.
Right.
We could.
I know there's been some options that have been unfortunately too expensive.
Yeah, just too expensive. And hopefully as we grow, and we got to keep it affordable for those. But that's how much goes into thinking about all these different formulations. Is we could do this, but we don't necessarily, because it's too expensive. To Keith's point, we don't buy the cheap stuff. Just to make it work,
we're not going to sacrifice our standards to make something more cost effective just for that reason. So I think there's a lot of thought that goes into all the different steps of our process, and I think that's an important piece, and I don't think we ever sacrifice anything along that line just to make something to make a buck.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why I can be challenging at times, is because I have high standards, and I have high standards for my patients and for my own pets and for my own health. And I wouldn't want to put anything out there that wasn't going to be held to those standards.
To help Otis.
Yeah, exactly. And so as you mentioned, like some of the other, there's a couple other, like digestive enzyme. We felt it would be best to have that as a powder, because if you take that digestive enzyme, we're not sure the stability of it once it goes through the extrusion process into the chew. Plus, would it then start to interact with some of the ingredients in the chew? Yeah. So we wanted to keep that separate. Phytoprofen Vet is one of our chews that we don't have a powder of, and that the reason being with that particular product is because of palatability. So when we used to have the Phytoprofen Vet, the Phytoprofen was a human product, and when I would have clients open that up and put it food, they hated it.
Yeah, was it ginger? What was it in there?
Yeah, so ginger is a variety of things. So for a variety of reasons, we were like, let's just keep it as a chew and do the best that we can. Right. And I think like Magicare Vet and B-Complex Vet, they were only started as chews, and we just never have made it into a powder. And I think that's just because they just have worked that way.
So for all of you out there, we're always thinking, we're always trying to figure out what's best for the animals in our lives. And, you look at other developers, we've never done gummies, and we do have a hemp tincture. Delivery is important, and the company that you find to work with or use, it's important. Yeah. And I hope you guys can understand and see that from, the brief explanation and process that we had from start to finish. If you cut out one of those processes, if you decide to use a cheaper product, or to Keith's point about phytoprofen, if you're like, let's just make a chew just so that we have one, it might not work out that way, but it's important that you trust a company and trust a formulator, to be doing right by you. And that's what we always strive to do.
And be transparent about it too. Is like just, is we're not trying to pull one over on anybody.
No. And again, it takes quite some time. It's not like, a lot of effort and it goes into it. A lot of work before it even hits the market. And a lot of energy. And that's just from Keith, just a formulation standpoint, and then it comes to procuring the ingredients, so on and so forth.
Sourcing, and then manufacturing, and then how that influences stability. And there's a lot of different variables that go into that, which are really important. But I think the takeaway is that we hold ourselves to a very high standard, and we're not going to sacrifice that.
Yeah. Anything else you want to tell anybody about powders to choose?
I think that you just have to listen to your pet, as always, and they're going to be the ones that tell you. Like if you have a picky pet, probably chews may not be the best option. I think you're going to have a better success rate if you use a powder and mix it into something tasty. Because I think that's probably one of the biggest questions we get from clients is like, my dog won't eat the chew. What do I do?
Sure.
Right? So let's try
use
something.
the powder.
Exactly.
Yeah. I, again, like I said, we're always taking a look at everything. We, like Keith mentioned before, we've downgraded a couple sizes of the powders just to make it even more simple for, our customers, just more concentrated. Same dose, less powder. Easier to hide, so to speak, but, easier for that dog, especially smaller ones, to get that down. So thank you, everybody. This has been great. We love our podcasts, and we love all our customers. So please tell everybody about us. Watch our shorts, watch our podcasts, like and smash, as the kids say these days.
If you have any questions, let us know.
Yeah, let us know, please. And we one of the great things that we offer to all our customers out there If you write us a detailed and a pretty specific question, we'll typically, a lot of the times, forward it to Dr. Keith, and you guys will get a personal response from him. That's about all we take it, because if it gets any more than that, we say, hey, go visit your vet. But we
can't give like really specific medical advice, but I can certainly help guide you on some choices.
Especially when it comes to supplements, especially when it comes to, diet, when it comes to, hey, I have a dog that has a specific ailment here. Dr. Keith does know, and we can always help you find a veterinarian that's in your area. We've got a pretty big database of people we work with. So, anyway, we thank Dr. Keith for his time as always. We love having you in studio.
As always.
And pets are the best.
Pets are the best.